Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today with a Bethesda news update. DualShockers recently conducted an interview with Bethesda's Pete Hines himself at PAX East 2018. During that interview, they got to talk about the Nintendo Switch, the continued success of that console, as well as Bethesda's support of it. On top of that, they talked about Bethesda's focus on single-player games and how Bethesda creates products as a company. Quite honestly, this interview shined a lot of light on how Bethesda functions as a company and how different they are from other AAA developers out there. So I highly suggest you read the remainder of the interview, but the most exciting part is what Pete Hines had to say about E3, which is what this video is going to be focusing on. So now, let's get started. Let's look ahead then. It seems like your latter half of the year is kind of empty right now, says DualShockers, to which Pete Hines agrees with, saying, it does seem like that, meaning they obviously have stuff in the pipeline that will be released at a later time in this year. DualShockers fires back asking, will that be changing in the next few months, particularly in a time around June? To which Pete Hines says, I couldn't give you any guesses as to what we're going to announce and when those games will be out, but I will say we have a lot of new stuff to talk about at E3. Whether or not folks realize it, this is hell on earth time for us with E3. We are in the midst of so much planning and work for all of that content, but I'm really excited. I think we have a lot of stuff that folks are going to like. To my earlier comment, it's going to be a big mix of stuff that's all over the place. It's not going to be all one kind of game or genre. It's going to be a lot of stuff in a lot of different areas, and hopefully there's something in there for everybody. So there's a lot to digest there if you look at the fine details. For example, talking about how there's a lot of new stuff that they have for E3. Does this mean a bulk of new IPs? Normally, we could expect at Bethesda's E3 conferences the standard ESO updates, Elder Scrolls Legends updates, and a trailer for Quake Champions. Has that changed a little bit, where now Bethesda is going to be focusing all on the new stuff and doing what they've done this year, which is getting a lot of announcements out of the way for all these updates coming to these games, because we know Elder Scrolls Legends and Online just got updates and announcements for their newest content expansions. But obviously the biggest takeaway is that Bethesda says it's going to be a big mix of stuff that's all over the place, not in one kind of game or genre. So I was thinking back to previous E3s and what they offered, how all over the place were they, and did they have a general focus? Like I said, each of them had their respective Elder Scrolls Online, Elder Scrolls Legends, and Quake Champions. But there's one thing I noticed when looking at all of Bethesda's games is they're all in first person except for The Evil Within. Prey's a first person game, Wolfenstein is, Doom is, Fallout is, Elder Scrolls is. But I think the differences are in the finer details of the game themselves, because for example, yes, Dishonored is first person, but it's also mainly a stealth title. Doom is, yes, a first person shooter, but it's more of that run and gun, high-paced action faster than pretty much any game out there. Meanwhile, a Fallout or Elder Scrolls, yes, is first person, it can also be switched to third person, but it's an open world RPG. When I look at E3 2017, I thought there was actually a pretty big mixture of stuff. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily good, as most of you already know my thoughts on how disappointing I found that conference. But when you take an honest look at it, they had Creation Club, announcements for updates coming to all their respective titles, Wolfenstein, The Evil Within. There was a mixture, but the idea that there's potentially something in there for everybody is what gets me curious. Because does that mean we're going to have a first-person shooter with a narrative focus, kind of like a Wolfenstein, but then we'll also have our open-world RPG, which can only come from none other than Bethesda Game Studios? In fact, DualShockers asks just about that. Can you tease if we will hear anything from Bethesda Game Studios? To which Pete Hines says, I cannot. Now, this may not seem like much, and it absolutely is not anything, but I think the next set of answers from Pete Hines actually tells us a little bit more about Bethesda Game Studios. So expectingly, DualShockers says, of course you can, but I have to ask. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, Arcane has been tweeting a lot regarding Prey lately. Do you have anything to say about that? Will we be hearing from them soon? Pete Hines talks about how much he enjoyed the game, how he recently beat it, but then the exciting part is when he says, part of what you've probably noticed is that we've hired a new community manager who's been focused on Prey. She's been awesome and has been doing a lot of fun stuff around April Fools and other things. But yeah, I don't think you've heard the last of Prey. I just couldn't tell you precisely when you might hear more. But obviously, given the teases that we've seen on that respective Twitter account, something's happening at E3. Now, what stuck out to me here was Pete Hines' refusal to tease something from Bethesda Game Studios, but instantly, in a almost contradictory fashion, talking and teasing something for Prey, saying, I don't think you've heard the last of Prey, and the account itself was teasing it beforehand. Pete Hines really didn't have to say anything, but it shows that Bethesda is trying to keep a lid on whatever BGS is working on. Does that mean something is going to be revealed soon? I sure hope so. I will repeat what I've been saying for a while now. I will be more surprised if Bethesda Game Studios doesn't announce something this year rather than if they do. How about I add a little more fuel to the fire? A viewer of mine dug up an interview by Game Reactor, who also had a chance to talk to Pete Hines at PAX East 2018. Here's what Pete had to say. "We have some surprises in store," he said. "We're going to be talking about a healthy number of new games and new projects, and look, I'm really excited. We've been working on E3 for this year since September of last year. I'm already 7-8 months into working on E3, but I really like how it's coming along. I think there's going to be something in there for everyone, regardless of what you play on or what kind of games you're into, and my biggest hope always is that we deliver on the promise of E3. I think we promised a lot of stuff last year. We shipped every one of those games, and they were all really good quality. I think we had the highest Metacritic rating of any publisher in 2017, and that's our goal this year, is to not only talk about the new stuff, but also deliver on promises and give people the kind of games that they really want and expect from Bethesda." So expectations from Bethesda this year, a lot of us are expecting a new game from Bethesda Game Studios. I might be reaching a little bit there, but what's more exciting is what he said in that first sentence. There's a healthy number of new games and new projects. Hell fucking yeah. Also, Pete emphasizing that they've been working on this since last September. It's clear that there has been a lot of additional preparation and thought put into this E3. Let's just say this much. The expectations are going to be rising now for Bethesda's E3 conference because Bethesda themselves have hyped it up. Bethesda themselves are saying, hey, this is actually going to be a really big one. We've been working on it since September of last year, which was only a couple of months after their 2017 atrocity of a conference ended. So me thinks that there was a little bit put to the side for 2017 to make for a very big 2018. Time shall tell though. This interview was a little exciting to get an idea of what Bethesda's trying to create for E3, so they're saying it's going to be a big mix of stuff that's all over the place, not one kind of genre or game. So I'd love to hear your suggestions. What do you think is going to be at this year's E3? Fire away in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.